and you as the audience can ask the questions as prospective students that you do not dare ask in other sessions. So among our distinguished panelists are alumni and students from each of the STEM faculty, namely engineering, science, computer science, medicine, as well as the integrative science and engineering program. And we also have a wide range of career choice among our alumni, both in academia and in industry. So you can ask our alumni panelists later about the career choices, how their PhDs are useful in their career choices, and so on. And without further ado, let me first introduce myself, and then I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So yeah, I'm Okto, an NUS Integrative Science and Engineering Program alumni. I submitted my PhD thesis in 2019 in solar energy, and prior to that, I was doing masters in physics. So not directly related, but yeah, still applied for my PhD there, and then eventually changed supervisor, but changed my research field halfway, but finally completed my PhD and submitted the thesis on time. And now I'm working as a postdoc in NUS, as well as running a startup called Alpha Energy in Indonesia about solar energy development in Indonesia. And may I ask Vera to introduce yourself. Vera is a Singaporean who completed her PhD in engineering in 2000 and is now the board director of Gaia Tech and was previously the CEO of Sopra Steria Asia, among her other prominent roles. Vera, please.
Thank you, Okto. Hi, afternoon, everyone, and prospective graduate students. It's really honored to be here today. Okay, let me just introduce myself. I was in NUS for my PhD from year 1996 to year 2000. It was very exciting, but less advanced as of today. We didn't have, I think we only have Cambridge, and we didn't have today's U-Town and good facilities the students have today. So during the 4 years, I think I was one of the first few batches of students has cross-discipline training from NUS. I was in the early batch where my application domain was in civil engineering, which is in transport management and traffic management. But the core of study I did was artificial intelligence, neural network, and other AI stuff. At that time, we don't have Python. We have to write C codes, and I still submit my codes to the computing center. I still remember, yeah. So very exciting time. And yeah, I see someone is smiling, sharing the same view perhaps as what I did previously, yeah. So it was a very good experience when I attend this cross-discipline training. It actually benefits a lot when I attend my industrial career later on. I had my 20 years of, or more than 20 years industrial career, which I did the first and now the Singapore Intelligent Road Management System, which is running on AI platform indeed. We are managing the island-wide traffic. And during then, I also attend Harvard Business School, which trained me with a wider business perspective, allows me to manage more from business development and APAC angle. So I think as of today's context, I would recommend a cross-disciplines knowledge build up. This could be very useful to our prospective students. Yeah, I will just stop here for the introduction and I welcome any questions later on. Thank you, Okto.
Thank you, Vera. A pleasure to have you here. Next, may I ask Robin, who obtained his PhD from NUS Medicine in 2009 and is now a Vice President of Strategic Partnership at AliveX Biotech, China.
Thanks, Okto. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Chan. I was a graduate student in the School of Medicine Biochemistry Department from 2004 to 2009. I was working in the lab of Marcus Wenck, who's now the head of the department. Back then, when he first started out the department, he was just a new professor who just came from Yale University. And he was doing a very interesting field of research called lipidomics, which is the study of systems biology in the lipid world. And then that was a very good starting point for me because it was a very new field. And at that time, I was applying it to HIV research and retrovirus research. After I graduated, I continued on in the academic research field. I went to Columbia University, where I used this lipidomics technology and I was applying it to neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I was a postdoc for, I think, about 4 years. And thereafter, I became my own I became an assistant professor. I had my own small lab that I was running. And then I was doing more clinical research at that point of time, going from basic to clinical research, working with a lot of doctors, looking for biomarkers. And then after that, somewhere at that point of time, I realized that, the research life, while very exciting and, you make a lot of interesting discoveries, it wasn't really for me. And I wanted to make the switch towards business. It was around that time when I was an assistant professor that I took advantage of Columbia having like a very good business school as well to do a part-time MBA. So I got an MBA from Columbia as well. And after I got my MBA, I left Columbia. I wanted to come back to Asia. So I decided to come to Shanghai, where I'm still based in Shanghai at this point of time. So I started working at the first biotech company as in the business development role for a small biotech. I was there for about 2 to 3 years. And then after that, I subsequently moved to my current company. Actually, I just started my new role 2 weeks ago, actually, in this new company. So in my current role, I'm doing strategic partnerships. So I'm trying to look for, basically my role is to look for potential partners who can use the technology that is being developed in my company. And this role actually is a business role, but it actually requires a very strong understanding of the science. So I think, really the academic research training that you get from doing research, from reading papers, this really helped me overall to really understand what's going on and to really learn how to explain it to people, to help it make sense to people. So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm happy to talk more about this and the career choices and all later on.
Wow, a lot of exciting experience. PhD, assistant professor, MBA, startups. I mean, these are the career choices that I think every graduate student think about, and you have explored all of them. I think that's the prospective students for sure will have questions to ask about that. And next, may I ask Anurag, who finished his PhD in computing in 2018, is now a postdoc at Berkeley and will be an assistant professor at Harvard soon in a few months. Anurag, can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Okto. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet everyone, and it's an honor to be here. So I work in the area of quantum computing and also something known as quantum complexity theory, which is a part of computer science and a part of quantum computing. I did my PhD, as Okto said, in 2018, where I was in Center for Quantum Technologies and School of Computing. I was a PhD there from 2013 to 2018. My PhD was based on quantum communication at that time, which is a really beautiful area of research, which I worked on with my supervisor, Rahul Jan. After my PhD, I moved from the coolest place, that is Singapore, to the coldest place in the world, that is Waterloo in Canada. And there I was a postdoc for about 2 years. I'm in California right now. I moved there last year, and I have been pursuing research in similar areas. And I'll be studying as Okto said, I'll be studying as a faculty in the computer science department at Harvard University January next year.
Thank you, Anurag. Pleasure to have you here. And next we have the last but not the least of our alumni panel, Dr. Lok Gree. Dr. Lok Gree completed his PhD in 2019 in science and is currently an assistant professor, or maybe, yeah, Prof. Gree then, assistant professor at Rotterdam School of Management. Prof. Gree, please.
Thanks, Octo. Hi, my name is Gagui. You could call me GG for short, if it's easier. I'm just started as assistant professor at the Rotterdam School of Management, so I'm physically in the Netherlands right now. I did my PhD part-time, and at that point I was actually jointly supervised by two supervisors, one in the Department of Mathematics, and also another at the Department of Analytics and Operations in the business school. So I had to move around campus quite a lot. Yeah, so it was a great experience, and I think I really enjoyed having that diversity of expertise coming from different faculties, and it has really helped me in my work today. I work in operations research and specifically robust optimization, and also looking at how do we move to prescriptive analytics by bringing together machine learning and operations research. So that's a large part of my what I do today. In my past life, because I did my PhD part-time, I was concurrently working in the Singapore government. I've worked in the Public Service Division, the Prime Minister's Office, and I've also worked in the Government Technology Agency, and Smart Nation Digital. So a number of places in the government, all largely doing data science. So I was a team lead of data scientists, managed data scientists that have done data science and operations research projects in the government, and I still remain a consultant for some of these agencies today. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Gree. And so, yeah, it's interesting to also have a panelist who did his PhD part-time and is now an academic. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Maybe we'll explore that later on in the discussion. Next, we have our student panelist. First up is Sarah Geiger from the US, who is now year 4 at Genome Institute of Singapore. Sarah, please.
Hi, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So my name is Sarah, and as mentioned, I am in my final year, final almost month of submitting my thesis, so that's been quite fun. And my area of study is in applying population genetic statistics to bacterial outbreaks to better understand how we can use these tools to look at evolutionary pressure within the bacterial genome. My background is in microbiology, where I studied drug resistance in Acinetobacter baumannii back in the US. And I guess just some talking points in case you're curious, because I'm not quite sure what your profiles are. I am here in Singapore under the Singa Award, which was granted by A-STAR. And they also have different branches through other universities around Singapore. And that has allowed me to do my PhD through NUS, but I'm physically located at the Genome Institute of Singapore, where I work with Professor Swain Chen. And I look forward to the later discussion. Thank you very much. Back to you, Octo.
Thank you, Sarah. And next is Wuchi, a Singaporean. Oh, used to be Chinese, now a Singaporean.
No,
also,
I'm not Singaporean.
Oh, sorry. I have a wrong info here. So sorry, yeah.
Been here long enough though.
Okay. Yeah, also year 4 and now pursuing PhD at ISAP, Integrative Science and Engineering Program, used to be called NGS. Please, Wuchi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet all of you guys, and it's really a pleasure to be here among all my very distinguished cohort mates. And I just submitted my thesis a couple months ago and just waiting for the oral defense. And my research area is on membrane studies, which is for applications like water desalination as well as carbon capture, pretty much revolving around the energy sector, energy environmental sectors. So for example, there are a couple of water desalination plants in Singapore, and they implemented technologies from the reverse osmosis water desalination technologies from our group. Personally, I came from China many years ago, from a Singapore government-based program called SM1 scholarship program. So that's about 14 years ago, and I can pursue high school studies and went all the way through junior college and to NUS. So I pretty much went through the exact same educational track as the local students. So I knew a lot of things about Singapore. So that's why maybe Okto mixed me up with a native student. Anyway, so my undergraduate studies also were completed with the NUS, and I applied to the ISEP program about 4 years ago, which is a really, really good interdisciplinary doctoral program. And if you have any questions about, studying abroad as a foreign student or as a Chinese student in Singapore, you can approach me, and I have a lot of perspectives to share. So back to Okto. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wuchi. Yeah, I'm sure our foreign prospective applicants would like to learn more about your experience being integrated into Singapore environment. And I think that will be a talking point later on as well. And next we have Samson, who is in his third year of PhD in computing. Yeah, please, Samson.
Thanks, Okto. Yeah, so I'm Samson. I'm third year, but also final year. So I just started my final year. So I'm in the industrial PhD program between NUS Computing and Salesforce Research. So my research generally revolves around natural language processing, which is a subfield of artificial intelligence, which is a subfield of computer science. So my research revolves around making NLP systems more socio-linguistically inclusive, which means basically there are many different language varieties in the world. So, and it's not we don't, for example, English. There are many sub varieties of English, and the existing natural language processing systems are mainly trained on American English. So when you try to use them on other varieties like Singapore English or African American English, they don't work as well, if at all. So my research basically revolves around helping NLP systems be robust to such linguistic variation.
Oh, that's you are in your final year already, and only 3 years. That's quick. I have friends in computing who did his PhD in 5 years, but you are doing it in 3 years, and industrial PhD program, no less. So our last but not least panelist for today is Jonathan Schwinger from Germany in his second year of PhD in Center for Quantum Technologies. Please, John.
Yeah, hello and welcome everybody. I am, like said, now in the second week of my second year and therefore clearly the newbie in this committee. And yeah, like Anurag, I'm also in the Center for Quantum Technology here in Singapore. I started my undergrad in physics and solid state physics. Then I went to the theoretical side where I was doing more cryptography. And during my master, I was more working in a group that was kind of in a vacuum. And so for me, a big point was to go to an institute and something. So we have many people working at the same field. And that's exactly what you have in CQT. You have many different groups. So now I am with Yuan Gao working on superconducting quantum computing hardware. And just as an example, just this week, we are going to have a talk by a theoretical group in quantum machine learning. And there might be correspondence so we can implement some of their things on our systems and so on. And yeah, I think I can generally answer good questions for people not from Asia coming to Singapore. So that is clearly my experience. I'm also still quite fascinated, right? Just staying 1 year in Singapore now, and yeah, looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. So that concludes the introduction of our panelists. And now we already have 2 questions here, and please keep the questions coming so that Okay, it's already 3 questions, and I'll just get them answered one by one. And please keep your questions coming. So there's a question from Praharsha, who is planning to apply to join PhD program in NUS, NUS with SUTD. And Praharsha doesn't have many research papers and would like to know what are his chance of getting into PhD program in his case. Maybe we can ask the recent who entered NUS recently, maybe Jonathan or Samson would like to answer about getting into NUS and whether you need to have research papers beforehand and what's your experience like.
Yeah, I can take that. So my experience, okay, I do have 2 research papers, but to be fair, they are not the most impressive research papers. It's like a small project in my undergrad and my master that was publishable, but I don't think that is what got me into NUS or like into CQT. I think it's more important that you are clearly motivated, that you have a good connection to your supervisor, which is quite important. And I think for me, it was most important to have a 1 hour 30 interview with my supervisor, where we talked about the things we wanted to do, where she could see that I already had a few ideas about what I wanted to do. And of course, you also have to kind of back up. You have to have a certain track record in your academic skills to back up that you're able to learn, to work on your to study on your own and so on. But I think the most important things are to know already about the field, to be informed, and to have a good connection to your supervisor. That is very helpful. So I don't think that papers are necessary at all. I think most of my peers actually don't have any papers. So if I ask around because I was also interested, and most of my peers don't have any papers. So that's not a clear requirement.
Yeah, thank you, John. I didn't have any papers when I applied and when I got into NUS either. So I think, yeah, you don't need to worry, Praharsha. Next is a question from Agika from Indonesia. And she would like to ask how to choose the supervisor, because she's still not sure which supervisor to choose, and she would like to continue the field from her master's degree. Maybe the current students also would like to take this question about choosing a supervisor for her PhD.
I can help out if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it, Sarah.
Excellent, thank you. So the best advice I have for picking your supervisor is you kind of need to know 2 things. First, you need to have an idea of what you want to learn, what you want to get out of your PhD. But if you're coming in, you also want to kind of figure out where you want your funding to come from, because different scholarships that you apply for may affect what supervisors you'll have access to. So once you've kind of got those 2 things figured out, really it's a matter of just checking based on your funding source, who are the supervisors that you'll be able to see. They'll always have a website where you can check out what research they do, what research they've done, what vision they may have for their lab. And you can always, I do highly recommend reaching out to them as well. For a lot of these scholarship programs, it very much helps if you have a professor that's also interested in having you as a student. And so you can start this conversation before you start the application process to get a better idea of where you want to take your education.
Thank you, Sarah. Maybe there's another person who wants to add into the question to answer.
Yeah, maybe I can add something.
Yeah, Samson.
I think it's very important to have an advisor that's supportive beyond. I mean, it's important to have a supervisor who knows the topic that you want to work in. But I think it's even more important to have a supervisor that's supportive of what you want to do. So I think I saw on Twitter like a thread about choosing a supervisor, and one of the most important things was kindness of your supervisor.
I would maybe like to add to this because I do have a few friends who are not super happy with their supervisor, not in NUS, but I talked to them about this and they said they are still fine because the group can catch them. So it's not necessarily, I mean, obviously having a bad supervisor is like the worst thing that can happen to you, but usually you're not in a vacuum, right? There are other people around you. And if you have a lot of postdocs and other PhDs, it is certainly possible to, even if you are really passionate about the topic and you think that the supervisor does not match, that is not necessarily a complete no-no. Like you can have a great group. You will probably work most of the time anyway with the PhDs and postdocs. So I think that's valuable to add.
I think it's also important to know that your profs have likely graduated a long time ago. So they may know the fundamentals, but they may not know like the state of the art. So you should expect to learn most of the things yourself anyway.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in here. Of course, I'm not a student panelist, but I think because I also currently supervise some students, so I just like to really echo about what they're saying, that the relationship between the student and the advisor is a, sometimes up to 5 years relationship. So you really want to pick someone whom you can work with on a very long term. And changing the supervisor is an extremely disruptive, event if it does occur. So I guess my advice is really you really take a time to don't go into the rush to find a supervisor, because I think a lot of first year PhDs, when they come in, they have this sense that, oh, everyone has a supervisor already, I need to go and find my supervisor really quickly. Don't rush into it. Take a time and talk to the people who work with the supervisor you're interested in. Like talk to their students, talk to their postdocs, talk to the research group members. Trying to find out, how's this person like, how's the working relationship like. The other thing you can also consider, as is in my case, is to have multiple supervisors and possibly from multiple faculties in multiple departments. So I think something that is increasingly popular recently is for people to have one senior faculty member, like a professor, and then to have a second supervisor who is a more junior faculty member, which is like a assistant professor, and that sort of gets this nice balance, which I think Samson was mentioning just now about having people who are extremely knowledgeable in the field and who are able to open doors for you, who are able to bring you to different places after you've graduated, also to bring you to different places. Be it in terms of exchange opportunities, in terms of opportunities to collaborate with other great names in the field. And that's what the senior faculty person would be able to bring to the table. But at the same time, you also want to have, the dynamicism of working with assistant professors who are really, some of them are trying to make their names, right? They're trying to make their names. And, there's a lot of excitement that you might get from working with some of these people. So that's another piece of advice you can consider.
Thank you very much for the insights. From a professor, no less. Thank you. So I think, Agika, you can hope that helps to answer your question. Next, we have a question from Shinyi, currently an SM2 scholar at NTU. And she would like to for us to share about our doctorate program that we've been through, and if we are okay to be approached by email later on. So maybe if the panelists are okay to be approached by email, you can just type to everyone here your email address, if that's okay. If not, then yeah, that's also fine. So maybe any volunteers to talk about your doctorate program? Maybe someone who has not spoken yet.
Maybe I'll just share a little bit on that. Actually, that's a very, very broad and general question, because that you have to condense 4 years to 5 years experience into a few sentences. So yeah, it's gonna take forever to finish that. But then what I think the that makes a doctoral program different is that it totally puts you to a level of challenge, puts you to some challenges on a totally different level than the undergraduate studies. It relies a lot on your drive, your passion, as well as your ability to process failures. And what I think that makes a student, a graduate student, a true scholar is when he or she can really master the process of facing or confronting failures, because that's what a research student is going to do all the time, day after day. And that's something that a lot of graduate students really didn't think through before they choose this path. They just thought that it's a good title, it's a good degree, and just went for it. So, and especially as from a Chinese background, a lot of us still think that a PhD degree it's good just in its name. So sometimes we really didn't think through what we are passionate about and what we really like to do, and whether we can face it or we can take it when there are so many failures, during the research. So that's what I would like to share about deciding whether to go into a doctoral program. And just a little bit point add to the previous discussion is that actually nowadays choosing a supervisor, it's still hard, but it's not as difficult as before, because you get the opportunity to explore first through the rotation, the lab rotation, and a lot of PhD programs in NUS provides you with this opportunity to explore up to like 2 or 3 labs each for 2 to 3 months before you finally decide on the supervisor you want. So that actually helps you to avoid the kind of the change of supervisor or change of direction during the very first year, rather than it's all the way into the 3rd or 4th year, then the cost of changing becomes really high. So I think now they really make this process less painful for the students. So yeah, that's what I want to share.
Thank you, Wuchi. And may I also ask either Vera or Robin maybe to answer this question about to share about your doctorate program, because the two of you have non-academic career now, and perhaps you can share about how this doctorate program is useful or not useful in your career now.
Sure. Maybe I can go first. So, I did my doctorate program. At that time, when I first went into it, my mindset was that I really love research, right? You definitely have to love research if you want to do a PhD. Not so much if, I think not so much if it's a master's, but a PhD is a real big commitment. It's very different, I would say, from studying from a test, because as Wuchi mentioned just now, you're going to get a lot of roadblocks, a lot of challenges, and you have to really love it, or else it's really going to be quite torturous for you to go through this, right? So, when you come into a PhD program, you have to be prepared for difficulties, but at the same time, you also have to be very focused. You have to aim for like publications and to be able to graduate, right? So I would say you have to be mentally prepared for that. And then I think important part of it is to really have a goal of where you want to be after your PhD. If your goal is to have an academic career, to have a postdoc, I would say that you need to really make efforts to really go out there and network, go to conferences to present your work. I think that will really help for you to make that connections to that next steps. And if you want to go into industry, then you have to plan for a more industry kind of outcome, right? You have to get to know people potentially in companies that you're interested in working for, and then just to get to know the process, get to know the people. So I would say that I wish I had done more of that, more of the networking bit that I didn't do when I was a graduate student. I only did that when I started doing that as my postdoc. right? So I would say that these are the two things that I would advise anyone to do in a PhD coming in.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Vera?
Yeah, okay. I do share a lot of common things with what Robin has said, especially when you decide on the PhD commitment. It is a big commitment and we need to be determined to do so. And coming to finding a job after PhD defense, when you find a job, networking is very important for you to learn in something that really sustain your interest for the lifetime, so that you do continue with a passion in your career for something that you will dedicate all your energy and effort to. Perhaps adding on to what else we need to do, the PhD allows a person to stand out from the rest of the crowd, I would say. It is not a necessary thing, but it's definitely something make you different. For me, I think my personal experience is that it adds on to person's quality. First of all, a very simple thing is paper writing. When you grow mature in your career, many of the time we are writing papers. You could be writing papers to get the funding. You could be writing papers to your boss. You could be writing papers to public agencies who can buy in and endorse what you are doing. So the training coming from PhD, from the paper publication, organize the thoughts for us and train us in a very good paper writing. Later on, allow us to climb up the passion and do your whatever fundraising and so on. That's one point. Second point is, regardless which career you're going to pursue, the bounds to be difficulties, uptime, downtime, and so on. The determination you have during the PhD training actually will help you at lifetime to be very, you will have a tough character and you will survive regardless of whatever difficulties you could receive. I still remember in my working career, when the engineer says that, no, this is impossible, or this is something that people has never done before. If you have gone through that yourself, you were definitely in a position to encourage them to be resourceful and overcome the difficulties in their work. So I think these are a personality and training that we can also achieve and obtain from a PhD course. Yeah. Back to you, Okto.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vera, for the insights, how the PhD can still be useful even if we are not pursuing an academic career. Next, we have another question addressed to Jonathan. How was it like to integrate from Germany to Singapore, and how is the work-life balance like? May I also actually direct this question to Anurag, because Anurag is also a non-Singaporean. Anurag is from India and also has to integrate to Singapore. And maybe so both of you can answer this question, and maybe Sarah want to add in also later about how different it is, how different Singapore is to your home country, and how easy or how difficult it is to integrate to Singapore.
Personally, for me, it was not that difficult. Like for me, the biggest difference is that I'm actually from a very small village and Singapore is a big town. So that is for me a larger difference than going to the different culture, to be fair. But that's also, I think, because I'm fairly outspoken and I did not find it too difficult to make Singaporean friends, or just generally a lot of friends around CQT and so on, and to do many things in Singapore. I mean, as a PhD student during COVID also, you're not going out that much, right? I mean, you are going basically from your flat to the office, and then you are hanging around with a few friends afterwards. But personally, I found it quite a pleasant experience to come to Singapore because, well, everything, like you can go around in Singapore very well. The weather is quite great. You have quite a few activities to do, like hiking or other things. And regarding, so for the integration part, I think for me it was quite easy. Also, I like the food and so on, so that's quite nice as well. And regarding the work-life balance, I think a PhD is not easy to say. Like people before me already said, the PhD is kind of self-authored. So for my profits, basically, when we have a certain project, you have to get work done, and how you do it is completely up to you. So if I would not come into office tomorrow, nobody would really bat an eye. But if we have something on Friday that has to be done, it should be done, right? And I think that's kind of a good approach to do it. You do the work, you get it done, and if you need in between some time on your own, or you want to take a day off, that's also all right. But I think the difficult part is that it's all up, the responsibility to plan and everything is all up to you. Nobody will tell you how to do it. And I think in the beginning that can be quite frightening. If you don't plan properly and suddenly you have way too many things ahead of you and you can't tackle it, that's a problem. But if you are able to cope with that, I think it's quite a great experience to be able to manage your own time and to tackle problems and solve them kind of with your own mind. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Maybe Anurag would like to share your experience.
Absolutely. So let me follow up on Jonathan's last comment regarding work-life balance, and then I'll steer back to the coming from India to Singapore. So one thing to add to Jonathan's comment is that during PhD, what happens is by second or third year or something like that, you will find yourself overwhelmed with work, and it just comes like a tsunami. It comes suddenly. So one thing very important, an advice I got long back, was to make sure that you have some time to relax, to rewind, and do things with your fun and do things with your friends. And make sure that the work is around that time. I mean, don't have the attitude that, okay, I'll finish my work and then I'll do something. Rather, it's more like, okay, I will make sure that in a day I'll have 2 hours to watch a movie, 2 hours to play some games, something like that. And then you plan everything else accordingly. That helps a lot in terms of not being overwhelmed with work. And now going back to coming from India. So everyone here who is interested in coming to Singapore from India, I think you'll really enjoy Singapore. So, well, there's a lot of Indian culture here already. It's ingrained in the society. And also, it's an opportunity for you to kind of expand yourself, expand your knowledge of, several other cultures around. So for me, it was really easy. CQT, the research group was really excellent. Well, I mean, there were people from all over the world. And one thing I really like about Singapore is it's so close to many countries around, and there are cheap flights to go and travel and to explore lots of beautiful, if you want to explore volcanoes, you can go to Indonesia. If you want to explore beaches, there are a lot of places around, and treks, and it's just a really beautiful place to be. So there's no doubt I didn't have any problems.
Yeah, thank you, Anurag. Although I suppose now we cannot travel as freely as before. But...
Very soon, I hope.
And Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I can add in a couple quick things. So integrating into Singapore was very easy. Kind of the biggest thing that stuck out to me was it's very easy to build a community as you enter your program and you meet other students. Like, you'll automatically just start reaching out and tapping into each other's networks and really finding yourself a new family, sort of to take you through your journey of your PhD. And something that I've also really appreciate integrating into Singapore is the safety. Here, it's, sometimes you're up really late working, you have too much energy, too much anxiety, whatever, you want to go for a run. Here, it's completely safe to go on a run in the dark at 10 p.m. alone, which is something that is very, very special. But more importantly, to comment on the work-life balance, this also ties back a little bit to the conversation we had previously about supervisors, because every supervisor does run their lab very differently. And if you are reaching out to supervisors, be sure to ask people already in the lab what their work-life balance is like and whether or not there's anything that's sort of enforced within the lab, because on paper, they may say that it's flexible. But I do know some labs where people are in the lab 7 days a week. Like they get in at 9, they leave at 7. And so there are some labs that do publish very well, that do very good quality research, that have a unique interpretation of work-life balance that puts a little emphasis on one over the other. And as long as you're aware of what that is when you're getting into it, I think you'll be okay, because that does suit some people better than it suits others. However, there are plenty of other supervisors that really kind of let you set your own schedule. Really what they want to see is results at the end of the day. And the timeline for when you acquire those results is up to you. And so that's something that you kind of figure out what works best for you over time, but also in discussions with different labs as you're applying.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I see Vera raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you, Okto. I saw the question came from a French. So I just want to share, perhaps add a bit more. I've been working 14 years for French company, Sopasteria Asia, where in France is Sopasteria Group. So I've seen generations of French aspects coming in and out. So I just want to share a couple of points that how Singapore welcome and how the French and the Singapore work together from government level to welcome our expats and the future job security for foreigners. I hope this will help people who is trying to decide coming to Singapore to study and then settle a couple of years in Singapore. So first of all, the French community in Singapore is very large, 15,000 3 years ago. And there's an organization called French Chamber of Commerce of Singapore, which has a very close community. Personally, I've been on this board for a number of years. I have been connection with 3 ambassadors from France to Singapore with connections. So I see how much effort that 2 countries has put together. Okay, people are very friendly. There's many French companies setting up their regional headquarters in Singapore. Those companies, including pharmaceutical companies, security companies like Thales, Airbus. So this is a big community, what I want to say, and Asia being the future center of economy worldwide. There's many French people or even European graduates, they would like to come to Singapore, getting an exposure for a couple of years, like 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, gain enough networking and experience, and then they return to their home country again. So I just want to add on to say that do not have this worry about culture, immersion, and so on. It's a very open country in Singapore, and there's already a big community available here for French. And you will also have job security, I would say, after the graduation from the US, if you are in consideration. Yeah, Okto, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vera. So yes, for foreign prospective applicants, no need to worry. I'm also from Indonesia, and I never had any problem integrating into Singapore or finding a job afterwards in Singapore. So yeah, no need to worry about that. And the next question is how to choose the narrow area of research that we want to work with for 4 years, and how did we choose our topic of research? Any volunteer for this question? Anyone at all?
Maybe I can answer that. I can take a stab at this question. Yep. So when I was deciding of what topic I want to work for, and then also who I want to work for, I think it was a question of, for me personally, I went with who I wanted to work for first. I chose my professor based on, I met up with him, I had a few conversations with him. I had to make sure that our personalities kind of like was a good match before I decided to pursue it further. And then I also, of course, wanted to make sure that my professor had very good previous publications from before, right? Because that would kind of carry on into the quality of the work that he's going to be doing going forward. So that was, in terms of looking at who I wanted to work with. And then at the same time, I had to make sure that he was also doing an area of research that was going to be, the future, right? That was going to be very hot in the future. So he was working in the field of lipidomics. He was one of the pioneers in the field. So I knew that he was going to be doing like really cutting edge stuff. And then it's really good to kind of ride the wave on this, at least for me, to ride the wave on this kind of professors, the kind of work that they were doing. So I think you need to look at a few different factors, looking at research and also looking at the person that you're going to be working with.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
Yeah.
Anyone has anything to add?
If I can build on that a little bit.
Yes, please, Sarah.
Yeah, so absolutely. It really, there seems to be a recurring theme, but for me as well, when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do my PhD in, the first question was, who is the supervisor? Kind of for a multitude of reasons, many of which we've already discussed, but there's a lot of things that the PhD is not just what you're becoming specialized in. I think that's perhaps a common misunderstanding. So you will be devoting 4 years of your life to studying this one very specific niche, which over time, you may think is really awesome, and everyone else will kind of question why you think that way. But what you're learning in the process is the process itself. It's the process of going through a whole lot of information to figure out what's missing, and then finding out different methods that you could use to find an answer that no one's been able to come up with yet. And that process itself is really what the PhD is about, not just the topic itself. So going from there, really where you want to start thinking about the topic itself is where you want to go afterward. Where do you want to head into next? Because as previously mentioned as well, PhD is an awesome opportunity to network. And so by studying in a specific field and asking a specific question, you'll start to meet other people in that field, whether they're in academia, whether they're doing startups, whether they're going into policy making. And so in that way, you can really kind of architect your own future. And so it's, I guess to kind of sum it all up, it's not really about the specific topic itself, but it's everything kind of orbiting that topic that you want to choose when you're going into your PhD.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I see there are 3 panelists raising their hands. Maybe we can let Goei first to speak their minds.
Hi. Yeah. So I think there's a lot that is related between choosing your topic and choosing your advisor, as a lot of people have mentioned. But I also want to just mention this because as someone who's doing research right now, whatever that you were working on for your PhD in the long term, 20 years later, 10 years later, that it's probably not going to be very important, to the world at that point by then, right? So, if you're actually looking at doing having a long-term career in academic, then what happens is that you must be prepared to evolve with how the academic community is evolving according to what are the real life needs, what the world demands out of the research in that field, and also evolve with new disciplines coming in, bringing new ideas in there, and having to work on that. So I started out my PhD, my whole PhD is essentially looking at operations research about optimization within networks. But today, I'm starting a new stream of work that is related to looking at how operations research and machine learning come together, and that's that's totally new. It's something that is wholly driven by my own personal interests and my personal experiences. But then it also involves you having to learn new things. You have to suddenly learn a lot more about machine learning and statistics and about things that you did not learn when you were doing your PhD. that's because you either find it interesting or that's what this is what you feel that it's how you want to contribute to this community. So that's evolving, right? What you do and what are research interests is evolving, and you need to be sort of have that mentality in some sense, that to be, one, prepared for it, and two, also that it's kind of more of to let fate have some part to play in this, let serendipity have some part to play in this, right? It's to go about it in some sense more of knowing that your research field chose you rather than you chose the research you wanted to do, and that way you sort of get a lot of joy from it, but at the same time you're also ready to meet whatever the challenges. You're always having this mindset where you can learn and you can do different things, and really to respond to what Vera was saying just now, that you have this confidence that you can meet new challenges, you can do things that no one else has done in the world before, and that you can confidently sort of meet that head on. And I think that's kind of what the whole training really does to you at the end of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Geiger, for also going to be also explaining a bit of the philosophy of PhD. And Anurag also raised a hand. Maybe Anurag, you want to share something as well?
Sure, yeah. So I like how Geiger put it, that the research field chooses you instead of you choosing the research field. I just wanted to add that the field, in many cases, the field starts to look narrow only in the hindsight. And you can always start with a perspective where you're really interested in a lot of things. And maybe the first problem that you solve, you really like the way you solved it, and then that becomes your direction or something like that. So that's, in some sense, that's what happened to me. I was really interested in a lot of things before I started my PhD in physics, computer science, in black holes, and all those things. And then the first problem that I solved was in quantum communication with my supervisor. And then, that really shaped my perspective on the world. And it's always possible to start a PhD with a wider approach and just see how it goes. And usually it works out well, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Anurag. So I think we don't have to worry too much about the research topic, the specific research topic that we want to pursue at the beginning of our PhD, but at least have some idea and let the research field chooses us rather than us choosing the research field. Next, Samson, yes, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I think this is again important. It's again important why choosing a supportive advisor is important, because then you can kind of pivot when, let's say, you don't find a particular topic interesting.
Yeah, completely agree on that. And so the next question, so from Edward, who would like to apply for PhD in pharmacology, but he doesn't have much experience in animal testing or the specific skills for pharmacology, and he's wondering what are his odds to be accepted to the PhD program of his choice. Any takers for this question? How important is the specific knowledge or the specific skills? Yeah,
I can take this one because I kind of ended up changing fields somewhat from my undergraduate to PhD.
Yeah, please, Sarah.
Yeah, sure thing. So fortunately, it really isn't that much of a big deal. My background in undergraduate was in the wet lab, doing kind of molecular genetics, like making mutants in different strains of bacteria, then testing their susceptibility to antibiotics. And when I came here for PhD, I actually picked up programming, and now my project is almost completely computational. And really, again, what they're looking for is your ability to kind of just grasp the scientific process. It's, can you take a lot of information? Can you kind of parse it and figure out what questions are being answered, which ones aren't? And for the questions that aren't being answered, even if you're not a master in the techniques themselves, can you identify the areas that you'll need to explore to be able to find the questions? Because really picking up these techniques themselves is part of the process of the PhD. So that's the quick 2 cents I have on that. And it looks like Jonathan may be able to build on that.
Yeah, I mean, to make it maybe more specific, I think 90% of what I started to do when I came to CQT are things I have never done before. And I think that is also what you have to expect. Like in your undergrad, you will generally have a broad spectrum of different courses on many different topics you will never touch again. And so maybe the only courses that kind of translated for me were like quantum computation 1, 2, but even that is only like the basic of the basics. So you get into a lab and you have so many things to pick up, like microwave engineering for me, cryogenics, many topics I never even dived in before, but it's more about being able to figure out where to look and then to look and apply it. And you will find that in this process, you will learn way more and way faster, at least for me, than I would have if I had courses on this before, because you're doing it on your own. You kind of figure out what you need, and then suddenly it makes sense because you applied it. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, John. So yeah, you don't need to worry, Edward, about not having the specific skills. I'm sure if you show enough enthusiasm and enough willingness to learn, then your professor will take you on it. And next we have a question about finding out professors. So which professors are looking for PhD students and how we can find out about it, and how to explore the specific topics of research professors work in and what PhD students they would like to get. Maybe Wuchi, you want to take this question, how you chose your professors, how to find out what professors are doing which research.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I would like to share a little bit on that. It actually varies from person to person, depending on their like the 3rd and 4th year during their undergraduate studies, whether they've been already involved in certain kind of research work during their undergraduate, so that they want to extend on that and just continue to work on that particular area or that group, and maybe in the same institute or in a different institute. For example, for my case, I already been working on membrane studies during for my final year project, my milestone project, so that there are some untied ends, some unfinished ends. So I just want to continue working on that to solve the mysteries. So I pursued it. I continue to pursue that for my doctoral study, and also for some PhD programs, some PhD scholarship program, they actually don't. They're not asking for you to know exactly what you want to do or which exact supervisor you want to go for. They first assess your overall ability to see if you are really the material to become a research student, and they provide you with a certain period of time for you to be involved in some lab rotations and to explore the different supervisors, so that you can have the opportunity to, like, say, to understand yourself, to know, to finally know what you're really interested in. So for the program that both Okto and I are involved, were in, the NGS ISEP program, basically that's how it works. They assess you as a overall as a student, as whether you are suited for research work, and then they leave the choice to you to decide on which supervisor you want to go through the lab rotation experience, maybe with 2 to 3 supervisors. So that's how I finally decide on what I want to do for my PhD studies, and how NGS ISEP program students can decide theirs. Yeah, that's pretty much the experience is like, how the experience is like. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wuchi, for the answer. So yeah, you don't need to worry too much about the professors, but of course, if you want to find out about what the professors are doing, what the group is doing, then you can also check out the papers from the professors, from the group, and then maybe reach out to some of the co-authors in those papers and find out more. But of course, That's if you are super keen to explore what these professors are doing. And the next question from the same person, from Rizali. What is the most important factor for the admission acceptance? Maybe a professor among us can answer that. And then also, what is the requirement for PhD graduation? For maybe I would like to direct this question to different people who actually to Goei, who did a part-time PhD, but also to Samson, who is currently doing an industrial PhD, and maybe to another person who did full-time PhD. Yeah, maybe we can start with Samson or Goei first about the requirement for graduation.
Yeah, maybe I'll just start first. The requirement for PhD graduation differs from faculty to faculty. So this is something that you have to be careful about. Right, usually there are three components. Usually there's a coursework component, which requires you to do a certain number of courses that you need to meet a certain GPA cap on these courses. The second requirement usually is that there is a comprehensive examination, what they call the comprehensive examination. In the other places, they call it the qualifying exams. And this is a crazy exam where basically they test you everything under the earth and expect you to know it. And it's actually the point where I would say the largest proportion of PhD students actually fail and drop out of the program. That's at least in the math department, this is the biggest hurdle, the comprehensive examinations. And then of course, the third and the last bit is the fact that you defend a thesis. And so most of the time, the thesis would actually be sort of reviewed by a panel. And the panel will include both internal professors and as well external examiners who will read your 100 over pages thesis and give you 17-page comments on your work. And they will jointly decide whether this work is sufficiently good for graduation or not. But at the same time, where exactly is this bar? That's a bit tricky. In math and also in the business school, roughly we'll say that if you have 3 papers which can be published in top journals, that would be a good enough requirement for graduation. But that's really where your advisor comes in, where your advisor really says, okay, this is enough, this is not enough, you need that, you did this. And usually, it's kind of more of a negotiation process with your advisor, because if your advisor thinks that the thesis will meet the cutoff, it will most certainly meet the cutoff. There are very rare cases where they put out a thesis and then it actually gets rejected. So I think broadly these are the requirements. There's a time limit. I think that if I remember correctly, the time limit is 5 years. Usually they encourage you to sort of graduate within 4 years, and the way they encourage that is that they don't pay for your subsistence in the 5th year. For part-time students, you get a bit longer, both in terms of passing the comprehensive examinations and both in terms of the total time it takes to graduate. Of course, you don't have to take all that amount of time. And usually I would say the time actually depends on what do you want to do after that. Because if after that you want to go into academia, then you sort of want to have enough publications, you want to have a strong CV to go onto the market. So that actually really decides on the amount of time it takes to graduate instead of what your advisor, your supervisor thinks is enough. Yeah. Okay, I answered the easier part of the question. I'll leave the more difficult parts to other people to answer.
Thank you, Goei. Samson, maybe do you want to add about your industrial PhD program? What's the requirement like? How it's different or the same?
So I won't comment on the admissions too much. For admissions for the industrial PhD, you're supposed to meet both the requirements of the university, which is NUS, and also the company. So basically the university interviews you and the company also interviews you. So if you're accepted by both, then you're accepted to the PhD. And as for graduation requirements, so it's beyond the paper requirements, like on paper requirements or official requirements. A lot of it depends on your advisor. So I know of cases where there are people where their advisor kind of holds them back from graduating. So that's why they take like 5, 6, 7 years or something. So here again, it's like it's important to choose your advisor wisely. Yeah, but generally, I think maybe not the minimum requirement, but the recommended requirement for graduation is 3 papers. Because in computer science, we have a bunch of papers that are related, and that forms our thesis, right? I'm not sure about the other faculties, but in computer science, that's how we do it. So generally, it's like 3 pieces of work for graduation. And I mean, that's like the requirement for graduation. But when you want to go on the job market, as Geiger said, then you are competing with other people who may be in the PhDs for like 5, 6, 7 years. So if you want to fight with them for academic jobs, then yeah.
Thank you, Samson. That's also been my experience as partly in electrical engineering, that we stringed our papers together into a thesis, and about 2, 3, 4 papers are considered good enough to graduate. Anurag, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add 2 remarks. First is that the requirements for graduation can really vary, and it also depends on the other members of the community of the field that you work on. So if someone, there have been cases where someone writes 1 paper that's really significant for the field, and that's enough to get the student graduate and get great jobs. Otherwise, a sincere contribution to science definitely makes a difference. Second remark is that in School of Computing, I believe the comprehensive exam might be easier, and it doesn't feel like it's all the questions in the world. But that's because mathematics is 1,000 years old and computer science is 40, 50 years old. So yeah, I would say computer science is probably easier to pass.
Okay, thank you, Anurag. And there's a quick question from Subramanya, whether there are any opportunities in CQT to work on quantum foundations. Maybe a quick answer from John.
The person to go there would probably be Børge Englert, who's a professor in CQT, who's well known for that. But I think he's retiring quite soon, so I don't think he's taking more students. That's a problem. The other person I would probably refer to then is to look maybe into Vera, who's doing fundamental things in quantum information theory. And besides that, well, I mean, also stating what is fundamental quantum theory research is not entirely clear to me, but I think you might want to look into Vera. That might be your best shot in CQT currently.
I would add also quickly, sorry, Jonathan, if you didn't finish.
Sure.
So I would highly recommend Valerios Karani, who works in very fundamental topics in quantum foundations, and he works in the physics aspects of quantum foundations as well. And
to be fair, he would be the other person to go to. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan and Anurag. Hope that answers the Subramanya's question. And next is what to expect during the interview process for PhD admission. Any takers for this? Someone who still remembers the interview?
I can go ahead and
go for it, Sarah.
Okay. So for my interview process, it was, I think there were actually 2 or 3 different interviews. And then there was a final interview where they actually flew me in to Singapore for 1 weekend for a face-to-face interview, which that was a 12-hour time flip and quite fun. But long story short, it's each part of the interview process will get to know you a little bit better. So the first interview is, okay, who are you? Are you pretty serious about this? And then as it goes along, it gets a bit more technical, to the point where my final interview, they were asking me, okay, so it looks like this is your prior research experience and this is your area of interest. What can you tell us about these specific mechanisms? So they were kind of exploring my knowledge of what I've done and what I would like to do. And also if you were to design an experiment to look at this, what would you do? And for all of these, it's less about the specifics of the answers that you're given and more about how you approach the question. So are you able to break it down? And even if you don't 100% know what technique you would use, or if there's a name for it, you would say, I would look for a technique that would investigate this. And it would need to give me essentially like this kind of data at the end in order for me to answer this question. So it's looking at, can you work through the scientific process kind of on your feet and in a high stress environment. And really, it's just my best advice for any interview process while you're looking at graduate school is to kind of, you've gone through a lot of education already. So it's take ownership of that, believe in where it's gotten you, and do your best to kind of stay calm in the face of pressure. And again, think of the big picture, try to really focus on the question they're asking you. It's under adrenaline, that can be quite difficult. And just be honest and open in communication.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I think, during the interview, there's no need to worry too much. In my interview, the interviewer asked me what is the second law of thermodynamics, and coming from physics, I actually forgot the second law of thermodynamics during the interview, but somehow I still end up getting accepted. So yeah, you don't need to worry too much in the end if you answer the other questions okay-ish. Yeah, Goei would like to add something.
So maybe I can come from the perspective of the people doing the interview. I've never interviewed for PhD candidates, but I do interview for the master's candidates, and there's some degree of similarity between them. So I would say, when you're thinking about it, you also think from the perspective of the interviewer, right? How much do you think I can actually deduce out of you, just having, just this half an hour, 1 hour of talking to you, right? There's not that much I can essentially learn about you, how deep you know about your knowledge and things like that. So from the interviewer's perspective, what can you really achieve, right? So essentially, the interviewer is interested to know that, one, do you really have a passion? When you say that you're interested in something, like you say you're interested in mathematics, then my question is, are you really interested? Then can you name me who's your favorite mathematician? Why is this your favorite mathematician? Do you know enough about the people, about the history, about the topic? What part can you show me where your interest is? Right. The second thing is, you said you want to work on this thing, right? Are you really sure you want to work on it? But if you are really sure you want to work on it, you must have thought about it. You must have had some ideas. You must have had, ways of thinking about, where is your opportunities, what's exciting about this. So you should be able to explain. So I'll be asking questions that would be testing how deep have you actually thought about this topic, right? As not the illustration of, why or how deep is your knowledge skills, but really just to see, have you really thought through it? Have you really if you really want to do this, have you looked up in the literature? Have you seen how people have done it today? How independent are you? How much do you initiate this exploration on your own? Because a large part of PhD is essentially this, right? It's essentially about you initiating your own explorations. Right. So I think my key point is still going back to this, which is think from the perspective of the interviewer, right? Think about what the interviewer is trying to find out about you. right? And then how do you sort of prepare yourself for that?
Yeah, thank you, Goei, for giving another perspective to it. The next question is about the necessity of having a master's degree before applying for a PhD, and whether there's anything else that this person can do in order to gain more opportunities to apply for a PhD in the future. Any takers for this question? Whether there needs to be a master's, whether we need to have a master's degree to apply for a PhD, and how to increase our chances of getting accepted. Yeah, Robin?
Yeah, maybe I can take this question. So I think in a short answer, it's actually no. You don't need a master's degree to apply for a PhD program. But I think what you do need to show is that you have interest in research. And if based on the short background here that you haven't done any research experience during your bachelor's degree, I would think that it's probably better if you spend some time doing research, maybe as a research assistant before you apply for the PhD program. I think that will increase your chances significantly. When I was a postdoc and when I was running my own lab, that we actually had a lot of students who did their bachelor's, but they didn't have research experience at all, right? And then they came in, they did the research, they did 1 or 2 years of being a research assistant, and that greatly improved their chances of getting into a top program. So I think the same thing would apply for here. But if you have a master's, then that's really an automatic for you to get into the PhD program.
Yeah, if I can build on that as well. I entered the PhD program here at NUS without completing a master's first. I was fortunate, and then I did have some prior research experience before coming into the PhD, but I would absolutely like to endorse the concept of getting some research experience before you go into PhD. Not only will it improve your chances, but it'll make your life a lot easier when you do finally make that transition. It was, when I compared my own, I guess everyone's path through PhD is a very unique experience. But when I looked at kind of the starting point of my path to the peers in my cohort that had already completed a master's, even though I was coming out of some research experience as an undergrad, I still felt a bit behind because I didn't have the same experience as they did in formulating large studies and answering complex questions, even through a coursework master's. And so I think it would be, if you want to commit a decent amount of your time to pursuing a PhD, which revolves completely around research, absolutely get some experience first and make sure you like it before doing so and committing yourself to that time.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. John also would like to add something.
Yeah, I would maybe also like to highlight that doing a bachelor kind of depends on the country. For example, in Germany, your undergrad is 3 years, and doing a PhD after 3 years is different than I think for the States, where your undergrad is usually 4 years. So I actually didn't know in the beginning of my undergrad that there's a thing of doing a PhD after undergrad, because after 3 years, I don't think you are in a good place to do a PhD. So for me, I thought the default is to do a master. And then I learned, okay, in other countries, it's actually 4 years, and that's different because the 4th year is then maybe like a lab year and stuff like this. So generally speaking, I think there are plenty of people doing a PhD just after undergrad, but like most people said here, it's definitely valuable to first gain some research knowledge and then build on that.
And Robin, you also would like to add something?
Yes. No, just to add on to that point, I think there's also a lot of help if you spend some time, if you have never done research before, to spend some time doing research as a research assistant. Because I think one of the important things of getting into a PhD program is a recommendation from your advisors, the people who supervise you, whether you're doing your research during your honors year or whether you're doing as a research assistant. I think that counts a lot in whether you get into a program or not as well. So I think that's another added benefit besides getting used to figuring out whether this is a career or this is a choice that you want to make, is also getting that recommendation letter. It's also a very practical thing for you to do this.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. And I'm just conscious of the time now. It's already 6:24 p.m. Singapore time, and we still have quite a few questions. If possible, I would like to have all of them answered, but I'm aware that some of the panelists might be on a very tight schedule. So if possible, I first would like to ask maybe each of the panelists to give an advice, maybe just one advice to our prospective applicants, and afterwards the people who are still free to stay, then please stay, and for those who need to catch something else, please, you can leave. So maybe we can have advice from each of the panelists. Anyone would like to go first?
I can go first, maybe with little hands-on device on doing a PhD, because generally speaking, the problems you're tackling are enormously. And if you just go every day into the lab with thinking about the entire thing, it's maybe a little overwhelming. So like for me, what helps is in some sense to define problems every day and like small chunks, and eventually these small chunks will build up to solve the problem. But so every day you go through the lab and you actually have this kind of experience, okay, you kind of accomplished the goal of today and therefore you're fine and you're actually able to kind of shut down after 6 p.m. or whatever and have like and be done with work. So I think that's quite helpful to simply break down your problems into small pieces and then do each piece a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, John. Next, Wuchi, you have your microphone unmuted.
Advice. Maybe I'll share a little bit too. So basically, what I want to say is all the attendees for today are considering about whether to take the PhD, and they are, most of them I think is in their final year, and it's in the at the junction to choose between to go for, say, to build a career in the industry or to start in the academia. So what I'm saying is, if you're not sure which to choose for the next 3 to 4 years, I think you should take time first to sit down and think, and to really read through and do your research first before making this decision. I see just too many of my peers who gave up halfway because at the beginning they make the decision too quickly. That's just my advice, to really think through before you make up your mind to do this, and really go for it and do your studies for which area and which research topic you want to do, rather than just really summarily look through everything and then just make a very quick decision. That's just my advice.
Yeah, thank you, Wuchi. Anurag, you would like to go next, since it's 3:30 a.m.
Almost there. Yeah, so very quick advice. I got this advice long back from a book by George Polya. He's a great mathematician, and it works very well if you're stuck on a problem, and I can promise that will happen during the PhD. You'll be stuck on a problem you're working on. So the advice goes like, if you can't solve a problem, then there's an easier problem that you cannot solve, and find it. And it has worked very well for me every time I'm stuck. So yeah, I would try that strategy.
Thank you, Anurag. Somebody else next? Anyone would like to offer his or her advice? Yeah, Sarah, please.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I guess a couple of very short points so we can all wrap this up in a timely manner is, one, anticipate that PhD is not going to be easy. Like it really is a degree of philosophy. It really should be about learning to rethink the way that you think and the way that you process information. And in that process, that means deconstructing all the notions that you may have had before and rebuilding them. And that'll result in a lot of failed experiments and a lot of very frustrating evenings trying to get something to work when it really should be, but something just isn't quite fitting right. And I don't know if it'll help to know, but just trust that it's part of the process. And kind of tying into that, the second part is really remember to network, remember to build a community around you that can help you through these difficult times, because they'll be going through them too. And talk to other people who've just finished going through this process so they can help guide you in a way that perhaps is a little less painful than doing it on your own. And reach out to people who are perhaps around you in your institute or your department. They've recently graduated, or they know other people who have their own startups or have moved into different fields, and talk to them, build those connections, reach out to them on LinkedIn. Don't be afraid to ask them questions, because it's an investment of your time where even in the beginning, if it feels like it's taking away from your research, it will pay off huge dividends when you're getting ready to graduate and you're starting to look at the bigger picture of your career and where you want to head afterward.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Robin, you would like to go next?
Yes, so I'd like to add on a little bit to what Sarah was saying. I think that the networking thing is really important. When you come into a PhD program, I think you can get a lot out of it. It's really an education, and you have, you really stand out from a lot of people when you have the PhD. But then, I guess the advice is don't think that your career options are just limited to doing more research or going to a university. There's a lot of career options out there. So when you're in the program, spend some time also thinking what direction you want to go after. And then make sure that you're, learning and networking in that particular direction as well. So have some future planning as well as you come into the program.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Maybe Goei would like to go next.
Yeah, I think I also like to echo what Robin's saying about, the PhD shouldn't really be, the end in mind, right? You shouldn't view the PhD as the goal, but rather the process. And what is it that you actually get out of this process? I think it's so easy to just do your research every day and not to see the time fly, and you're just going through a process and not realizing what you get at the end of it. And I don't think that's a good way to approach a PhD, but rather to sort of ask yourself, what is it that you want to learn? What is it that you want to grow? How you want to grow in terms of your skills, not just in terms of your knowledge, or also in terms of your networks, but just what you want to get out of this at the end of the day, and to very deliberately take the steps to try to achieve that, to try to sort of make sure that you are becoming a better person, better thinker, a person who knows how to react to business users in the world. To be a stronger person, or if you really want to be an academic, then how is your ideas getting more novel, or how's your way of your thinking evolving over time? So be focused on that, and be focused on who and which are the avenues you can get these sort of learning and development from.
Yeah, thank you, Goei. Maybe Vera or Samson. Vera, you would like to go next?
Sure, yeah. It is really a good learning session for students, prospective students, as well as I learned from the panelists as well. If I were to leave something over here, I would quote some recent conversation I had. Recently, I had a conversation with one resident doctor in Singapore, and this person, residency, so just finished 5-year study from School of Medicine. So I asked him, how tough is the study course over there with US School of Medicine? The doctor told me, it's hard to get in and hard to get out. So I'd like to quote this example over here. Yeah, study is a path we go through. So my advice is keep the final objective you want to achieve in mind and strike your path over there with determination. Many people students during student time might be afraid of writing papers, having a presentation in international conference and so on. What I would say that's very valuable. If you ever have a chance, write papers, present at international conference and interact with international experts, because that's part of the study that international experts help you validate your study and your research. Once you get improved in those areas, when you come to the final defense, PhD defense, I would say that your paper your work has been validated more or less, and you get a better, wider community support coming from your specialist area. Yeah, so if you could bear in mind what you want to achieve and carve out your path to it, you will success. Back to you, Okto.
Yeah, thank you, Vera. And last but not least, can we have Samson to give a piece of advice to the prospective students?
Yeah, sure. I think, so for me, I personally think having a strong dose of skepticism is very important. Don't drink too much of the Kool-Aid of your own field, because the most interesting papers come from challenging the conventional wisdom. When everyone thinks something is supposed to be this way, and you show that, oh, why are we thinking that this is actually, maybe there's some other consideration we've never thought of before. So that generally makes for the most interesting papers. Yeah. And I guess regarding graduation and like making your life easier, generally having publications in top tier conferences and journals makes like the QE go more smoothly and your proposal go more smoothly also. Because if it's not been like validated by peer review and all that, your examiners might question you more strongly, and they might be skeptical of your findings and how you're doing the experiments and all that. But if your papers have already passed peer review, they tend to be more lenient in a sense, because they know it's been validated by the people by the experts in your area.
Thank you very much, Samson, and thank you very much to all the panelists, as well as to the audience who have asked their questions. And we hope that the questions have been answered satisfactorily by the panelists. We are sorry that not all questions can be answered because of the limited time, but we would like to conclude this event for today. But of course, because I'm aware that the panelists have other things planned for the rest of the evening or morning in some cases. So yeah, if the panelists would like to leave, then they can do so. Also, the audience, if they would like to leave, they can do so. But some of us who are still free will stay around for another 10 minutes or so to possibly answer the remaining questions we have here. But yeah, thank you everyone for participating in this NUS Virtual Open House Graduate Discussion Forum.